There are many definitions of consciousness, many ways to talk about consciousness. I can talk about it from a scientific standpoint, from a neurophysiologic standpoint, from a neurochemical standpoint. But when I talk about consciousness in the context of awakening and realization, I'm referring to something very specific. And it's not something you're going to learn by learning terms. And it's not something you're going to learn by understanding. And it's not something you're going to learn by relating what I'm saying to other things you know and understand. So with that road cut off, the conceptual road or the intellectual road, how can you know consciousness? Well, the answer is so simple that it's just kind of absurd. And yet it's challenging because the mind continues to leapfrog over itself. The mind continues to try to project things into the future as if you're going to find it later or arrive at it or understand it later. It also tries to relate things to other things, which creates a sense of separation in consciousness. So what is consciousness? Consciousness is your direct experience right now. It's your direct experience of everything you've ever thought, everything you could think. Anything that arises in your mind right now is consciousness. It's the thoughts. It's what seems to be aware of the thoughts. It's the space between the thoughts. It's the imagined images or non-conceptual thoughts. If you imagine a chair right now, that is made out of consciousness. That's what that is. If you're experiencing an internal dialogue, blah, 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 blah. I think this, I think that, I think this is right, I think this is wrong. That is all made out of consciousness. It's made out of the same stuff. That consciousness can form any thought, but it doesn't stop being consciousness. It's like clay can form different figurines and models and shapes, but it doesn't stop being clay. The clayness is what gives it its ability to form any object, any shape. The consciousness is what gives the mind its ability to form any thought, any mental image, including the sense of you, including the thought of you. So it's all consciousness. When you see this, you can actually stop. Stop chasing concepts. Stop trying to grasp anything, including what consciousness is or what I'm talking about. And just notice you are all of that conscious space. Feels like you, feels like I, feels like the center. And it also feels like the periphery. It feels like the entire space of being, thinking, everything that you are. Inside, outside, before, after, belief, doubt. All of that is made out of consciousness. You can just follow those contours of thought. The beginning of the thought, the middle of the thought, the words inside the thought, the end of the thought, the silence between the thought, the seeming distance between the thinker and the thought. It's all made out of consciousness. Even the thought about consciousness is made out of consciousness. You could call it anything, it doesn't matter. So some people call it the sense of I am, or I, or being, or me. But none of those labels matter because those are just thoughts which are movements in consciousness. You've never stopped being the entirety of that consciousness. So you can just rest in it. Allow it to move as it does. Swirls and eddies in consciousness. If you feel like you're really grasping at thoughts right now, then stop pushing and pulling on the thoughts and just notice the most recent thought. Whatever it is. Is it a narrative? Are you judging, comparing this to something else? Are you remembering something? Then just go right to that thought, right to the substance of it. As close as you can. What's it made out of? It's like if you see a airplane writing a message in the sky and you were just to zoom right up into those clouds of what the message is made out of until you're so close that you're now approaching and inside and all there is the cloud. And then everything is the cloud. Now you know the substance of the message. This is consciousness. This is thought. Thought is consciousness. Consciousness is thought. It's only really a thought when we believe it to be something specific, something apart, something that points to something else. When we let go of that holding of subject and object in this space, when we let go of that holding of thinker and thought in this space, then there's just thinkingness, knowingness, consciousness. This is the practice. It's very simple. Once you see it, then any thought is fine because it's just movement of consciousness. And stillness of consciousness is fine because it's just what it is, always the same substance. There's nothing to think about here. You can rest here as a practice. Notice it's everything you could possibly think, including all judgments, conclusions, imaginings, the future, the past, beliefs, doubts, conceptual stuff, narrative, images, all consciousness. That's it. Just rest here.